I just thought it had a really nice rhythm to it. Kind of had it just really seemed to move along really well. And I think I don't remember what I was writing it before that, but that was what was sticking in my head. So I closed the other song that I was working on and just started doing this one. So I laid the first guitar part down, and then just like I do with most of my songs, I doubled that guitar part. So something you can do to make your sound bigger is just record the same thing twice and put it on different sides of your ear. So again, just had the left, and then I added that right. So it's different than just copying and pasting, because if you copy and paste the same audio, there's no difference. So it just sounds like something it sounds like one track, and you can't tell that it's supposed to be wide. When you have it, the same thing played different, like played two separate times, even though it's the same thing, all the little tiny differences between timing and, how you plucked the string, or maybe the string bent further when you plucked it, so the pitch is a little different. All those things make it seem wider because all those differences are, it's allowing you to hear them separately, even though it's the same thing. That's like the quick way of describing that. So that's our, we call that increasing the stereo width, the stereo image. So we've got that left and right. It's going to sound bigger already from the start than just with one guitar. The next thing that I did was, I really kind of started this as I'd call this track writing, where you almost come up with the musical idea, the music bed first, and then you write the lyrics and the melody on top of it. So I didn't really have the melody yet, but I did have this. The next thing that I added in was some beatboxing over it. So I don't know if I have the original beatbox track. Let me find it. So I keep like all my tracks, but I don't think I saw it when I was looking through it earlier. Yeah, so I don't have the original one. But what I did was I beatboxed, and then I cut it up into all these little parts, and then so we get this part now. So for this beatbox, I just had the original part like, so I just did that, and then I took the favorite and my favorite and my favorite, like all those favorite individual little pieces, and then I cut them up, and then I moved them around to match up exactly where I wanted them in the feel of the track. So, and then I start to add these effects, which is a little bit of sound design and a little bit of mixing, just to get it to fit where how I wanted it to sound in my head. So almost more like a full drum kit for some of those pieces. So if you listen to just so a couple things are happening even with just this short part. It's going left to right really fast, so it's just making it a little more interesting. So I have this tremolo set up to, instead of just going right down the middle, it's going left and right. So that just, it adds another sense of rhythm to the song to make it feel even faster. On the big kind of ga part there, I just have a bunch of distortion on it. So without the distortion, it's that, like it's that, just the normal, but when I put a bunch of distortion on it, so it just adds a bunch of urgency, is what I would call that, to the song. So when I'm hearing it in context now, it's almost like a giant like clap, or like almost like a crowd roar, like, and it's just opening and closing really fast, like, So once we had that part down, the next thing that I added in, we just have some of our basic kind of rhythm section here. Just a nice 4 on the floor kick with some extra little, some faster kicks to keep that moving along. What happens is instead of doing bum, 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 and then I switch it to like bum, 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 bum. It's the same tempo, but by adding those extra little notes in there, instead of bum, 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 it feels faster when you add shorter notes. So that's what I'm doing there, as well as adding this kind of, can't remember the name of the rhythm, but it's, you can see it's not like a dun, 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 it's dun, dun. It's got that kind of almost dance snare pattern there that's going on. So just adding another sense of rhythm to keep it interesting, not any sort of basic, just dun, boom, boom, little extra rhythm. So while all that's going on, we finally added in the vocal.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I think it has something to do with your shoes.
And
your heels are clicking down each path you're after.
We'll listen to a couple of the verses here. So you hear the first verse,
So keep your
you hear it switch melody here into the pre-chorus.
down. Keep your head up in those clouds. You're pulling me right off the ground. 'Cause you
And then we hit that chorus melody.
feel something fantastic. And you
So let's see what how we got there. So I'll go over the melody writing now. And we've got a question here. Do you play around with the special effects until you find? Yes, pretty much. It depends. So like with the beatboxing, I kind of had something in mind with what I wanted it to sound like in my head. And so as I'm beatboxing, it sounded really big, like, but then when you listen back, it's you know, toned down to what you're imagining in your head. So then you just have to add all the stuff back in to match what you're imagining. So that's where the distortion came in. Sometimes though, for example, this little sweep here, this little transition.
I can see
Ooh, here. That was one where I use this a lot now, but I just was messing around with all sorts of sounds that I could, all sorts of effects that I could add to just a reverse crash. So that's a pretty standard, or this is actually a noise sweeper, but I do it with crash cymbals too. But I just messed around with a bunch of effects to make it more interesting, and I thought that one sounded pretty cool. So it kind of sounds out of place just on its own, but when you hear it in with the rest of the song,
I can see you've got a certain swagger.
adds a nice little bit of ear candy there to keep the song moving along part to part.
Shoes.
So over to the melody now. We have,
Every step you take.
like I said, I keep pretty much everything throughout the recording process, and I can actually go back to the first melody that I wrote. So once I had, this is what I'll do sometimes, where I mumble right. So I just mumble the melody and kind of just freestyle words, and then I go back and rewrite it until it makes sense and sounds good. So the very first melody was, let's mute my main vocal here.
When the world is alone,
See,
where you walk in the world of rumba.
so it's got the very beginnings of a melody.
Turn their heads move. Everybody turn around the door.
And what I'm really trying to get here, not so much words, but vowel sounds or consonants and patterns. So you can hear I'm trying to go faster here. It's actually some of the chorus melody that I was using.
In that jacket makes me feel something fantastic.
And we'll
got me feeling hashtag.
And even on the first version, you can see I kind of didn't have the chorus right away, but kind of didn't know what I was going to do. And then
got me in the dress, got me feeling hashtag blessed. What else is hanging up?
so this part's kind of like just a freestyle part that's
It's not what you
that's starting to take shape.
doop, doop, doop.
And then I have that little instrumental idea, which actually ends up being a synth.
It's how you wear it.
But I was just kind of hearing that in my head. So
It's how you wear it.
so this part, that was just kind of me writing that out, sketching it out. So I always have that just idea kind of scratch pad. And then you can see as I go through, it gets a little more defined.
The room at attention every time you
And I'll try a couple different ideas. And I didn't really have the closest pre-chorus idea was on that fourth take. And the reason I switched from that really high note, that's actually the same or higher as that chorus melody note. And I want it, when I went back to actually record it and write all the lyrics in, it's always nice to have in pop that chorus melody to pop out. And one way that you can do that is by having the pitch higher, is by having the range of that chorus higher than your verses or pre-chorus. That way, it just, regardless of anything else, it just sounds more exciting because you've made it higher pitch. So then, instead of going you in that jacket, that's going to be the same note. You in that jacket. So you're not really lifting. You're actually going down a note because we would have gone up. So when I recorded the full version, in order to make that pop, you can hear the pre-chorus.
So keep your eyes wide open now.
Keep your eyes wide open now, on the floor without looking down. Keep your head looking down. So looking down versus you looking down. You in that jacket makes me. So we've already got a little more excitement going into the chorus just by raising the pitch. So that was something that I changed from the mumbling phase to through the rewriting process and kind of just going back through and writing the melodies over and over again, to something that made sense in the context of, yes, this is a cool melody on its own, but how's it going to pair up when I actually have the chorus next to it? Is it still going to sound as cool? Is it going to take away from the chorus? Because you never want to do that. All right, so that was the melody. I think I've got some chats here. Let me see. Chris, would you normally play around with fully with the FX setting, or would you use Logic's presets? I usually start from the presets and then just mess around with them. And whenever I'm messing around with presets, I very drastically, like it's not like tweaking, like just like tiny tweaks. Like usually I'll just like throw the knobs all directions and then dial them back to where they sound good. So, for example, like even on that, and this isn't a Logic preset. This is a Soundtoys plugin here. But I'm just like, I'm cranking this all the way on every setting pretty much like for the distortion. So if I'd been like light on it, maybe we start with the dry, like, and even on the, so if we go with, so I started with this preset, you can see, and then it just was still not powerful enough. So instead of just like, just barely tweaking things, you just kind of like throw them all in. Now, the things that were helpful on the preset were how it's cutting. So, you just kind of like pick and choose what you're using from each preset. For vocals, no, I've got my own vocal chain now that I like to use, or kind of series of effects that you would use on vocals to get it to sound good in a mix. So from the verse here, for example, I pretty much use these same plugins in the same order on every project now. And I start from a preset, but then I kind of dial it into what sounds best, and then I save that as my own preset to use in the future. So that's something that makes my workflow a ton quicker. Whenever I start a new project, I already have this track included in that project template set up. So it took me, forever to learn how to use them and find what sounded good. But now, especially if it's me singing every time, like these, I know that this will be a good starting point for whatever I'm singing, even though I'll have to tweak it just based on what I'm singing that day or how I'm singing it that day. But yes, start from presets and then mess with it. And then I save that preset so that I can use it again. And I keep all those saved so that now, I have this whole section for transitions where I want that micro phaser that we went through earlier. I have different transition effects that I like to use. I have a specific kind of set of mastering chain that I like to use. I have all these things that I've spent all the time tweaking those presets already. Now they're my own presets. So that's just a little workflow note there on the production side. The next thing we're going to talk through is, first is just that fun little bass line. I just love having like a big, obnoxious synth bass paired with the acoustic guitar. I like that. So, and again, one trick that I use here, effects-wise, bass can be tricky because it takes up a lot of headroom, which is just the amount of loudness that you can have. But it's often, especially sub basses and things, they're such at a low frequency range, it can be difficult to hear them on some devices like phones. So one thing you can do is just throw some distortion on it, or any other type of exciter, or anything that increases the higher frequencies of that sound. And what that does is it lets it punch through other speakers that might not get down to the low range. So even as you're listening, this is without distortion, or there's still some distortion somewhere, but now with distortion, without, with. So it's gonna punch through on some of those other devices, and what that also means is that you don't have to make it as loud. I don't have to use as much headroom on my bass in order for it to be audible in the mix. So that's kind of a mix of sound design and mixing. Mixing is that step where you make everything sound good together, get all the levels right, and then have it so that you're bringing out all the best parts of the song at the right time. So after the bass, the next thing that we do is, we had the melody down. We've got the chorus melody at this point. So in the chorus, how are we layering up that sound in the chorus? That's what we're going to talk through now. So you can hear, we still have the guitars going. But at this point, we have changed the bass line. So instead of the kind of very sparse verse and pre-chorus bass, we move into this more regular hitting bass. So again, this is one of those tricks that makes it feel faster. So that's something that we're using here in the chorus. Not only are we bringing that pitch or the range of the melody up, we're adding more hits, more notes. We're bringing back in the beatboxing. I recorded a tambourine, so I just have a tambourine that one of my friends left here, and I've been using it for everything now. And going into the post-chorus, we add a shaker. So just another little interesting texture there. I'm also just adding a tremolo, and this is where I'll take a normal shaker sound and just really try to make it something else. So this is just I don't even remember what I was using to make. I recorded this, so I don't remember what I used to make this. I think I was just like rubbing 2 drumsticks together. That was how I made this sound. And so I pitched it up, tuned it so that it's in key with the song with that pitch correction. Took all the low end out so it doesn't sound boxy. Made it punch through more. And then make it bounce around with that tremolo. The other things that we're doing, we have a nice little snare roll that I just thought was kind of fun. It was like a Scottish snare roll sample from Logic's library or something. Yeah, I think it might even say, yeah, like Scottish snare roll. So I just thought that was a cool way to add a nice little transition into each thing, into each next thought in the chorus. The other thing that we're doing here in the chorus and the verse, I've added another snare layer. So in addition to the we've added this kind of basic thing to just keep the chorus kind of marching on. So it's just this regular little snare sound in there that we're adding in to drive that chorus forward. And what we do in the verse, you can hear it goes from this kind of thing that punches through, and then we just EQ cut it so that it's more of a background sound. So it's softer, doesn't interfere with the softer vocal, with the very light, kind of airy vocal of that verse. So it builds from that chorus, but we can EQ that sound so that it's kind of matching what needs to happen in the song at that time. The next thing that we layer in on the choruses are the synths. So you can see I do this a little differently in each chorus because I try to build each chorus by adding different parts, whether that's another instrument or another counter melody or more background vocals. So you can see in the first chorus, we have these background vocals, or we have these kind of main vocals, and we don't have any of the harmonies. And then we add one harmony vocal in the second one, and then we just bring everything in on that third one. So we'll talk through the vocal layering, and I'm doing something similar here with the synths and piano sounds. So going from that verse, and this is a piano sound that I use in a lot of my tracks now because I like it. And this is, again, one of those things where I started with just a normal piano sound in Kontakt, which is another instrument software that I use a lot. And you can hear at the beginning, just a normal piano. So that's what it would have sounded like. But that wasn't the feeling that I wanted. I wanted it to be kind of like this magical sound. So this magical, like, synthy sound. So instead of just this normal piano, we compress it first. That's not really doing too much. That's starting to change it a little bit. That delay. It's kind of bouncing behind it. It's bouncing behind that piano. And then we add some of these just effects around it to this just kind of these effects down here are just reverbs, delays that kind of make it fit in an overall space. The one kind of non-normal thing that I'm doing here I also do this a lot. I have this crystal bus, is what I call it. It's, I don't know, I actually have never used, there's a pretty popular plugin called Crystallizer, but I don't know what it does. So maybe it's like the same thing, but it's this thing here. So it's pitched, I pitch it way up, and then I add some bit crusher distortion, like, you know, 8-bit sound stuff. And then I just leave the high end in, and then I add some reverb and delay on it. And it just kind of has this like little Tinkerbell magic-y feeling to it. So that's what's happening in the first chorus. You can see in the post-chorus, that's where instead of the doop 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 doop, start on the wrong note. This is in the post-chorus. Instead of keeping my vocal idea, I changed that. So we have a couple things going on here. We still have the piano. And then we've got this nice little pad. So that's kind of going in the background. We're just layering these sounds now. We have this, we call this like a fuzz lead. It's very similar to that first one, but it's, I usually have it lower notes, kind of mid-range notes where vocals would normally be. And then we have this kind of funky glidey sound. And then just this other lower, even lower note to round out the total sound. Because this is, in that post-chorus, there's really no vocal that's the focus. So if we listen back, why are we doing this? We've got the chorus vocal. Vocals are they're the main deal here. But then we have a little bit of that just kind of side note. It's how you wear it, but really the focus is that melody. It's how you wear it. Kind of the melody is the hook in this part of the song. So we're really just layering that in and making sure that it sounds full completely on its own, because it's not supporting the vocal. It is the main hook for that part. So that's going on in the first chorus. Let's jump to the third chorus here to see how we layer the vocals.
Cause you in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic, and you in that dress got me throwing #blessed. Whatever's hanging up in your closet doesn't matter, cause if I'm honest, it's not what.
That's the third chorus. If we jump back to that first one,
You in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic.
so that first chorus sounded big at the time when we listened to it earlier, but
Whatever's hanging up
when we're comparing it to this chorus,
in that jacket
sounds kind of tiny because this chorus just feels way bigger. Why is that? Well, I like to build each chorus as we go. So I like to have that third chorus be the climax of the song, unless it, we're doing like a sad song or something, then maybe it just goes downhill. But not this one. This one's exciting in the third chorus. So, first, I can't believe this didn't happen earlier. That streaming and running Logic, that'll be hard for a computer. All right, back to it. So, we've got a lot of going on in this last chorus. We've got the...
Cause you in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic.
This is my standard chorus.
In that dress got me throwing #blessed.
And what we have here is the main vocal.
You in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic.
In that jacket makes me feel something fantastic. So we've got that going on. And then the first thing I was doing when I recorded this was, you can see the labels here, so it's a little more obvious, but I just did the same thing.
Cause you in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic, and you in that dress.
And then I pan them left and right. So just like we did with the guitars, now it sounds bigger. So you want big, wide vocals for pop stuff, or I want it for my music. But in general, you want it for pop too.
In that dress,
So now instead of just that,
doesn't matter 'cause if I'm honest,
you've got this whole set of sounds coming at you. But that wasn't enough, so we did it again. So now we've got 2 doubles on each side. And you can see I panned them a little bit differently. You don't have to do that. I just thought it fit the space better. I didn't want it completely wide. So it's kind of surrounding you just with the one melody, just that one vocal line. And then the next thing I wanted to do was even punch that falsetto even more. So I did a double right down the middle, just on the U, and then just used Ozone Imager to spread it out a bunch. So instead of recording that twice, I wanted it to not be very distracting with different ways of singing it, especially because that's where I'm using some vibrato, like yo in that jacket makes me. So it just that one little U. So we've just got this punching through. So we just got that punching through when we needed to. And then I bring it back for that final tag. But that's not all. So this course, we're bringing in the harmonies.
In that jacket makes me feel something fantastic, and you in that dress got me throwing #blessed. Whatever's hanging up in your closet doesn't matter, 'cause if I'm honest, it's not what.
So now we've got this whole wall of sound hitting us. You'll hear that term if you look up like mixing video stuff, but
'Cause you in that jacket makes me feel
it's just this your whole stereo image has something going on with vocals at this point, because we have this really high harmony. I had to do that a bunch to even get it sounding decent, but that super high part there. So you don't really, it sounds really weird on its own, right? But in the context, again, these parts sounded fine. So they're two different harmonies going on. They're kind of weaving in and out. And then we've got this super high weird thing that sounds weird on its own, but in the context, so instead of this weirdness, when we tuck it back in there, it's adding this is an octave higher than the normal melody. So it's just this kind of invisible energy is how I describe it. It's invisible energy that we're adding to that last chorus by having the same melody, but way higher, and it's just tucked in a way that you don't really process it when you're listening, or unless you're like making it or breaking it down like this. But when you're just listening to the song, you're not thinking like, oh, like what's that weird super high noise? Like, it should just feel more energetic. That's the goal of what we're doing there. Nope, sorry, that was I think I used up my high notes on that. So that's the harmonies that we're building out there. The next thing we'll look at is the bridge. So I've had a lot of fun with bridges on the last few songs that I've written. So let's go from the chorus into the bridge, and then we'll talk about what it's doing. So this is that second chorus going into the bridge.
It's how you wear it. So try 'em all on, one at a time. Show me that one, see if I will mind the hideous. And if I don't talk, I'm next to my thought.
There it is.
It's only because nothing's ugly how you wear it.
So what's going on in the bridge here? Bridges are like, they're kind of, I think of them as an excuse to do something really weird or really cool in the song that wouldn't have made sense somewhere else. So I try to take advantage of bridges in that way. And you can...
So try 'em all on, one at a time. Show me the one, see if I will mind the hideous. And if I don't talk.
So the first thing we're doing is we're kind of departing from the normal rhythm that we've been using. And then we're switching to this. Maybe it's like I've almost turned this acoustic guitar into like a harpsichord sound by what I'm doing to it. And what I'm doing to it is some of the same things we were doing on the, really not a lot of effects, just a compressor, but then I'm using that crystal effect. And you can see we've got some reverb, we've got some delay on it, but it's really that crystal effect. So without the crystal effect, this is what we're dealing with. So we're still doing some nice, just different finger picking patterns. But with that crystal, we're just kind of raising it up, and it almost blends the barrier between a guitar and a synth, especially when we're playing it with our synth sounds. So the synths at the same time are doing this counter melody. And a counter melody is just a different melody that is played at the same time, or, you know, right next to each other. Something that kind of pairs up well with the main melody. So we've got whatever that is on the guitar that I'm doing. And then we've got the same kind of bouncy piano. We'll turn off that delay so you can hear just the main part of it. So this is just the main piano part that I played in. But then with the delay, it's got that extra kind of rhythm behind it. And then the next thing we're adding in is that pad. So we're doing some transition notes here. And then the last thing that we add in is that fuzzy, where you can almost hear, I just tried to make it so you could like hear that hammer of the piano sound on the delay, so that it's like a kind of like just the dull hammer sound of the piano string getting hit almost, especially in this part that we're hearing. And then we're hearing that on each delay. So the other thing that we do in the bridge is I take the same bass and then I just tweaked it a little bit. So this was the bass we've been using the whole song, and then so the difference that we're doing is there's this fat knob on the synth that I'm using, and it just makes it a larger stereo image, so that instead of bass just being right down the middle, it kind of sounds like it's this whole all around your ears sort of bass. And then we do this kind of funky, instead of the very staccato like dun dun or dum dum, whatever the pattern is, whatever pattern are we doing? Dum 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 dum. So very plucky. We go into this more legato, glidey, darkish sounding bass, which was a very similar darkish sounding before, but it just sounded like a kind of fun dark, like a fun, goofy dark on the verse. But now we get to this part. What we've done is I've turned this glide option on. So when I go between notes, instead of switching notes and hitting the note, it is kind of, it's like the difference between going like do 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 do. You just slide between the notes with that synth sound. So that's a setting on a bunch of different synths that you can use. So we go back through and just listen to that. I also add so that last part there, instead of going directly into the chorus, instead of going nothing's ugly how because you in that jacket, instead of going directly in there, we add this little break where when I was this is where you can turn like mistakes or just weird things into cool things. So when I was recording this, let's go find that bridge vocal. So when I was recording this, because nothing's ugly how you wear it. So main bridge was fine, but when I was doing the background vocals, for whatever reason, nothing's ugly how you wear it. Where is it? Let's see. Might be one of these. Where is there's this like sigh sound, you know? So that little sound there, that's what I was looking for. Okay. So, that sound, that was where, when I was recording the background vocals on one of them, I think I was looping it to do multiple takes. So you can, usually when I'm recording something, I'll loop a section and just sing the same thing a couple times and then choose the best takes. But on this one, I think I thought I was about to go sing the chorus and I forgot that it was going to loop. So because you, and I, breathed in to like, I started breathing in to like sing the chorus and I was like, yeah, the chorus isn't there. So like, I was just this like, and then I like went back and sang the next take. But then when I was going back through and editing, I found that little take, I found that little thing where I realized that, and I was like, oh, like that actually sounds really cool. So instead of hiding it and deleting the mistake, which I could have done, I made it way louder. So I boosted I'm using gain automation here. I just boosted that part so that it was the main thing happening. Like, it is the main thing going on there in the break. So, looks like Logic's getting tired. Nothing's ugly how you wear it. So I boost that part so it's now the focus and kind of acts as this like stutter start to going into the chorus. So if we just look at this part again. It's only because nothing's ugly how you wear it. And then I couple that with the acoustic guitar, kind of complementing it with a slide down. So if we just listen to the acoustic guitar part. So I have that added in too, where I'm just letting the note ring out and then just kind of sliding my hands down the fretboard, and that pairs up really nicely to be this transition straight into the chorus. So kind of, and then it just kind of all like sinks down into that last chorus, which then bursts back up with our higher notes and all the extra instruments and keeps on rolling through. And then in the outro, this last chorus, we're also doing some extra things with the guitars. So we add that kind of the same pattern as the bridge. Well, whoops, where is that? No, it's down here. So we've got this extra pattern added in. So I'm playing the same types of chords, but on different spots on the fretboard. So it's called, you're just voicing it differently. So it's like playing a C, but with the notes in different places. And then I'm also strumming it here, which we've added kind of chorus by chorus. So just that light pattern there of strumming to add some extra energy. And then once we get to the outro, we've kind of built it all up at this point, but I wanted to go back to just that guitar piece and kind of bring it back down to what started the song.
It's how you wear it.
And then we add this nice little, just this kind of background far away sounding guitar to add a little bit of more chill, reflective vibe at the end of the song. There we go. So that's the walkthrough of everything that was in the song. You can see we've got, again, just a little review. Started with the guitar, added in our beatboxing next, which we keep bringing back throughout the whole song. We have that little sub bass part that is just this obnoxious synth bass paired with this acoustic guitar rhythm. I don't know even what style you'd call that. And as we build each chorus, we're going from just the main vocals, layering a little bit of background vocals, some harmonies in there, to throwing everything in on that last chorus to make it sound even bigger. And then some of the tricks we were using were just, layering your snare sounds in the chorus. We were recording a lot of parts twice and then just panning them left and right. And whenever we're doing the synth design or just the sound design for synths, we have different instruments or different sounds, different layers, kind of taking care of different things for the overall sound. So talking through layering that post chorus here and what each one is bringing to the mix as we were adding it. But any questions from people in the chat? I know we've been answering a couple along the way. Okay, what was the most difficult part about creating this song for you? Any challenging parts in production? This one came pretty quickly. The writing doesn't take as long as it used to for me. Like, this one came pretty quick. I mean, you saw the very first vocal take where I was just humming. Like, the melody was there pretty early, like very quickly, and then it's writing this one was pretty quick too. I think just the mixing part and the editing and finding just the level of perfectionism that I have for getting everything to sound good overall. That's the hardest part of it. So, for example, there's this whole other layer beyond what we've shown so far where I'm automating every part of the song. So I'm automating EQs, I'm automating volumes, I'm automating different effects throughout the whole song so that it is bringing out the best of the song at each part. So, just as a quick example, the acoustic guitars, they're the focus in the intro, but once it comes to the verse, the vocals should be the focus. So we kind of tuck them away.
I can see.
So they're just this background sound now versus that beginning where it's the focus. So just going back through and just, tweaking everything and getting everything so that it sounds like a cohesive whole.
I can see you've got a certain.
So I don't know if it's just the most time consuming, I think. Maybe not the hardest, but yeah. Let's see. Keep track of everything in Logic. I label it. So I do label it. That's the biggest thing. But a couple ways that I stay organized in Logic. One is I have a template. So do you use, Stephanie, is your question. I don't know if you use templates. Have you used templates, or do you use Logic, or what do you, what software do you use? Everything has something similar. And there's a bit of delay, but I'll show what I'm about to talk through while you're answering. So you can save a project as a template. And that lets you, once you have an idea of the things you like using, create a kind of blank project with those things in it, with those tracks and with those effects, and then save it as a template. Then you can use that as a starting point. So my template includes my organization as well. So I have acoustic guitar parts, and then I have them stacked. These are called groups in Logic, or they're also buses, which are a way, it's kind of a routing technique. So this is getting a little more complex than a casual breakdown, but the individual tracks that you're using, you don't have to do all the effects on them just on their own. And you don't have to put reverb or whatever just on them. You can use sends to send the reverb to another track, letting you then control it there. You can also group tracks, which means you're sending all of their signals to one other track, which is what we're doing in this group. So this is not going directly to my master bus, my master track. This is going to a sub group of the song, which then goes to the master track. So that lets me stay organized. One, just by having these like nice, it's kind of nice in Logic. It has them as folders, which just makes it easier to look at. But then it also lets you use effects to kind of glue things together stage by stage along the way. Oh, gotcha. Well, Logic is free trial for 90 days right now, I believe. So, and they just came out with a really cool update. Not that I'm like, I don't even get commission on this stuff. But I love Logic. And they just released a really cool update that I haven't even downloaded yet. So that's one way that I stay organized. And then the next way is look at all these tracks here. I label them all. I have a naming convention for everything. So I have my Vox main verse. So this is vocals, main verse, vocals, main chorus, vocals, double. This is kind of like where I add in the little you, just that part. So I label each one. I sometimes I'll label this left to right instead of 1, 2, but I had 4 of them, so I used numbers this time. But behind even that layer of organization, I've hidden all the tracks that I used before. So I keep everything, like I said. So I've got the ideas. That's just my scratch pad. So I label that ideas. That's in my template. That's where as soon as I have an idea, I can just click record there and start mumbling stuff. And then I go through and kind of do a demo take if I'm not, like if I'm just like still thinking of lyrics and stuff. Usually I'll do like a scratch take just to like have something, like have something I can listen to in the car or whatever. And then I have my takes, which is like, all right, time to get serious about recording something. So I have this track created, and then I label that takes. And I do that in front of it instead of at the end, because when you're referencing that track and other effects, it's a pain in the butt when you have them all labeled like Fox main verse takes, because they all start with the same thing and you just can't see what track you're dealing with. So I always put it at the beginning. That's how I stay organized in that. And then every time I'm doing a different effect that is committing, where I can't reverse it, like sometimes if you're using a lot of plugins, you bounce a track down so that you no longer have to use those plugins, especially if I'm cleaning up noise or clicks. So there are some denoising and declicking softwares, or anytime I'm tuning vocals, or even when I'm comping or combining all the takes. So you can see I've got my take folder here, which is all the takes that I did for this song, which is a lot. We won't look at those. And then I'm bouncing that down to one track. Now I don't have to worry about messing up the takes. It's just its own thing. I then tune it, and you can see I've got the track here where I was tuning it. And then when I bounce it to the new track, I include tune in the name. So that's where I've gone through and vocally tune everything. So before it was tuned, this is what we were working with.
Swagger. I think it has something to do with your shoes.
So untuned.
Your heels are clicking down each path you're after. And every step you take makes the
So, I mean, not terrible to begin with, but
on the floor without looking down.
But this is where I tune it. And tuning, Melodyne does take up a decent amount of, it can cause delays and things. So once I have that, I turn every other effect off, and then I bounce it, or I commit it to the new audio file which I can then work with less CPU resources. But on the organization side, I just keep everything and I label it and then I hide it. So then if I ever needed to say, oh no, I wish I had not tuned this part or whatever, I can go back and just swap it in or swap out different takes and always go back, which is something I picked up by working with other people that I've recorded with, because they'll be like, oh, I like that first take better. And I was like, ooh, that one's gone. I deleted that like 10 minutes ago, but no more. I don't delete anything anymore. So that's partly how I stay organized. Just a bunch of labeling, naming conventions, and templates. Let's see. Just keep motivated during the whole production. Part of it's just like deadlines. So something that I did to, I mean, now I enjoy it so much. Like I don't know if I need to stay motivated on it, but like, I know what you mean. Like, how do you finish a song? Like, how do you teach yourself to be a finisher? And for that, I think that's what you mean, at least. I don't want to assume, but something that was helpful for me was having deadlines when I was still learning how to get through a whole song, because it's very daunting to, like, you make the song and then you think it sounds awesome and then you compare it to something else and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to go. And at first, like, I wasn't even capable of making a commercially viable song. So one, I didn't know how to finish it. First EP that I did, I worked with a studio with a mixing engineer who did a lot of the stuff to make it sound commercial, like all the editing, the tuning, the level of detail needed. And just seeing him go through that was the first step in learning what it took to make something complete like that. But then in order to like motivate myself, I started doing jingles, just freelance jingles online for people, and just having somebody paying me and having a deadline was something that forced me to, like, regardless of perfect, like it needs to be done by 6 p.m. or whatever. So that forced me to finish things and just get in a pattern of being efficient, and really helped me push things along as far as being able to go through an entire production for a song. And that was nice because I did it in bite size, like 15, 30-second jingles, and that let me build up my skills and confidence in a much more bite-sized approach than a 3.5-minute song, which has a lot more going on than a 15-second jingle. There are no transitions in a 15-second jingle. There are many transitions in a 3-minute song. So those are some things that I did to help on that. Yeah, because it's a lot. Like the writing part. I mean, I can write a song and get the idea down in 4 hours at this point, like, or less. But it's all the vocal takes. I'm getting better at singing, but it's all the vocal takes. It's like all the editing, all the sound design stuff that can really, and all the mixing, if you're mixing on your own, that can really take longer. How do you know when you're 100% finished with a song? It's more of a gut feeling. When I start tweaking things and then I listen back and it sounds worse, that's when I know I'm done. So that's it. Pretty much anything is like, whenever I'm learning how to use a plugin or whenever I'm mixing levels or anything, I just do too much of it and then I dial it back. And that's because if you don't go too much, you don't know that you went past it. Like, you're kind of creeping towards the edge. The edge might be another 10 feet, but if you just jump off the edge, you missed it. So like that's my approach to it. And it's kind of the same thing for finishing a song. Like, if I'm listening to it and I like start tweaking things and I was already happy, that's the other thing, is like tweaking it and it gets worse and it's still not good is like, that means you're not done. You just need to tweak it differently. But if it sounds good and you keep tweaking it, and then you're like, oh, this sounds worse, and you keep going back to that same one and it sounds good, like that's when I know I'm done. And I've just or I've over listened to it or something, that's where I'll like take a little break from it and listen to it again with some fresher ears. But yeah, once you edit and it's not improving the song, that's when I kind of feel that it's done. Cool. Thanks for the questions, guys. Anybody got any other questions here on the chat? I know we were jumping into got some music makers on the chat, so always happy to answer those questions. I think that might be. Well, feel free to keep throwing them on there. I'll stick around. Otherwise, I'm just gonna play through this again in case anybody wants to hang out. But otherwise, we're all done. So I'm just gonna play this through. Stick around to see if any other chats pop up. But otherwise, thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Hopefully, it was helpful for those of you making music, or just interesting for those of you following music.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I think it has something to do with your shoes. Your heels are clicking down each path you're after, and every step you take makes the world move. So keep your eyes wide open now, on the floor without looking down. Keep your head up in those clouds, you're pulling me right off the ground. In that jacket makes me feel something fantastic, and you in that dress got me throwing hashtag blessed. Whatever's hanging up in your closet doesn't matter, cause if I'm honest, it's not what you wear, it's how you wear it. It's how you wear it. It's how you wear it. I can picture you in any color, even ones on crayons with names they couldn't choose. If every outfit gives a clue who's under, wear 'em all till I know every shade of you. So keep your eyes wide open now, on the floor without looking down. Keep your head up in those clouds, you're pulling me right off the ground. Cause you in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic, and you in that dress got me throwing hashtag blessed. Whatever's hanging up in your closet doesn't matter, cause if I'm honest, it's not what you wear, it's how you wear it. It's how you wear it. It's how you wear it. So try 'em all on, one at a time. Show me that one, see if I will mind the hideous. And if I don't talk, I'm less of my thoughts. It's only because nothing's ugly how you wear it. You, nothing's
Uh-oh. Logic's super tired.
not.
It's Logic's bedtime. Oh, come on, Logic. You gotta at least finish the song.
Less of my thoughts. It's only because nothing's ugly how you wear it. Cause you in that jacket makes me feel something fantastic, and you in that dress got me throwing hashtag blessed. Whatever's hanging up in your closet doesn't matter, cause if I'm honest, it's not what you wear, it's how you wear it. It's how you wear it. It's how you wear it.
There we go. Thanks everyone. Again, stores 20% off with wear it 20 as the coupon code. Just at creativecat.com. Feel free to pick something up there. I've tried it all. So it actually is good stuff. I tested it all. I'm totally merched out with my own stuff. I'm one of those guys now. But thanks for joining.